So let's, one area which there's been some, I'm not sure who believes in what, but there's some, I have a query in my mind about, do we have inflation or do we have disinflation or deflation? And it just depends on which data you look at. Let's have a look at how bizarre the two indices, the wholesale price index and the consumer price index. It's a crazy divergence. The wholesale price index says we have a minus 5% inflation or deflation, and or disinflation, and the consumer price index says we have plus 5%. Now, only India can have two indices that say exactly the opposite thing. And you believe in the WPI and you believe in the CPI.
No, I think that's not.
By the one last thing,
yeah.
The GDP deflator is about zero, halfway.
Halfway to that.
It's like exactly if you average the two.
But that's almost by construction. So the real, what the National Income Accounts Office, which by the way they do a fantastic job in terms of procedure and institutions and credibility and so on. It's really a top class operation, and they're trying to upgrade it to world class standards. They actually only measure wholesale and consumer prices. The GDP deflator is just constructed.
Derivative.
Yeah, but I think that. On this, it's not that, first of all, it is very striking. It's not completely unprecedented, but the magnitude is unprecedented. Yeah. It's happened on a couple of occasions before. Right. And I think that it actually creates a very difficult problem for Raghu and the RBI.
Yes, because they both suggest very different policy prescriptions.
And just for the record, it's not that I believe in WPI and Raghu believes CPI. I think we both believe, probably, and Raghu, correct me if I'm wrong, that both are conveying information about the economy. And the question is, therefore, how do you from this take out what's essential and then, set interest rates or monetary policy, right. Given this bewildering, divergence in information that's coming through.
One example, that if you take the CPI as the authentic measure of inflation, you are worried about inflation then. So you will not lower interest rates. If you think WPI is authentic, you will lower interest rates. You're not worried about inflation. Right. So a huge impact on policy.
Right. No, so we moved to targeting CPI some time back. And I think that's the right thing because that's what people see.
Right.
So what explains the divergence? I think it's basically differences in baskets.
Yes.
The WPI has a lot of traded goods, a lot of commodities,
manufactured,
which are declining in price, and therefore it's negative. The CPI has services and food. Food, held down by global prices, but services are unique in India. You can't get education services abroad, you have to get them in India. Right. You can't get healthcare abroad, you have to get it in India. So those have been inflating at a higher pace. So the difference really, I think, is the difference between non-traded goods, which are a larger part of CPI, and a smaller part of WPI.
In a nutshell, what you're saying is that CPI, Consumer Price Index, has about 45, almost 50% food items, food and beverages, while the wholesale price index has 65% manufactured items. So one is almost for industry and one is almost for the consumer.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, but I think,
why, sorry, just one last thing. Why go for CPI when it's all about food and nothing the RBI can do much about food, more the monsoon?
Well, it's not just about food. It's also, this is the thing that has had us worried and has us worried, which is services. But what's important is, think of the wage price inflation issue. If we believe that people seeing the basket of goods they have to buy, see that basket higher in price, they want to have higher wages to be able to afford that. Right. So the spiral is not about commodities which some firm buys, but it's about what you go out into the market and buy. Right. That's what we have to combat as an inflation-focused central bank. One. Two, it is an issue that manufacturers might face a different level of inflation. But remember, it's not the -5 that you're pointing to, because even though their output prices are not going up that much or may even be falling, the input prices, which are commodities, are falling even faster. So their profits are actually increasing. Right. So if you look at what they're trying to discount when they look at whether I should invest, it's the profitability. And that's, a little better than where the WPI is, probably not as good as the CPI. So that's one. Don't feel that sorry for the producer. He's he's not as well off, certainly.
I mean, he must be worried that prices are going down because of lack of demand.
Exactly.
Kind of recessionary conditions, but that's so important for the RBI.
Exactly. So what we have to do is continuously focus on that CPI, but say, how do we get to that target that we have in mind? Maybe if conditions are weaker, we take a little longer. That's how we set our inflation process. We took 1 year to get from, the initial years were easy. 1 year from double digit to 8, another year from 8 to 6, but now we're going to take 1 year to get to 5, and then another year to get to 4. So it's going to taper off the pace at which we try and hit the target.
So the way I would, I mean, I think about
this.
The
way you disagree.
The way a little bit disagree is that...
I'd love to hear your conversations in your room, actually. That would be much more violent.
You know, I think that, firstly, they do convey very different things. And so in some sense, you know, the consumer is facing one set of prices, and the producer, even I think the adjustment that Raghu is saying is right. I mean, his profits are going up, but he is facing, you know, if you're selling steel, for example, you know, your real interest rate is really very, very high today because the output of your steel is just plummeting.
Yes.
And even discounting for the fact that your inputs are cheaper, you know, you're really hurting. So how should one, you know, digest all this information for, you know, conduct monetary policy? And I think that, I think Raghu is right that, you know, you've committed to the CPI. It's something that, you know, you should think. And by the way, I think that, you know, the way I would defend the CPI, even, and you make a good point, Pranoy, by saying that, you know, so much is goods, you know, what do you control? But actually...
So much is agriculture.
So agriculture,
food,
so you don't control it very much.
Right.
But actually, what you do control is, you know, if consumers are looking at this price and they say, should I keep my money in the financial sector, in banks, or should I put it in this? They look at the CPI. So by adjusting interest rates, you do affect consumer decisions in terms of, you know, which can affect inflation. You know, if they put money in the bank, that's good because inflation will come down, they're saving more. But the way I would, you know, and I've been, you know, we've had this discussion, is that, you know, you have this inflation target, but it's a flexible inflation target. It's not that, you know, you have to reach this thing at this point in time. That, therefore, what's extra information WPI is conveying some more information about the economy. In this case, as you say, economy is very weak in some senses. Therefore, we should exploit the flexibility to design monetary policy to take account of this extra information.
I mean, that's the point. He must be putting to you a lot, that there's recession, that nobody's buying stuff from industry, cars are not, the output is dropping, and you're looking at CPI and saying prices are too high. So
no,
what about...
I'm saying if we can't bring inflation down under these circumstances, then we really will have an inflation problem when things get better. So the point is that, yes, we've given some leeway for the condition of the economy, and clearly we're looking at the conditions of the economy when we determine interest rate policy. Right. But the point is, with all these positives behind us, WPI at -5 and so on,
that's a shocker.
We have to be able to bring inflation under control, because over time things will just get tougher if the world economy starts growing, there's inflation elsewhere. The other way of looking at this is, what WPI is saying is the world has controlled inflation, or in fact engendered deflation at -5, right? We can't sort of beat our chest and say, yeah, we did -5, it's all because of us. It's because of the world. What is because of us? That's 6 and 7, that's services. So what we need...
I would say, wouldn't you say that the world has helped us get to -5 and the monsoons made us go +5 in CPI? A bad monsoon will, I mean...
I think food prices over the last year have contributed some.
They're about 45% weight.
Weight, but they've been very contained.
Contribution.
But there too,